welcome to the VSC Healing Begins Here podcast series. The Victim Service Center, or the VSC, is a nonprofit organization that provides free, individualized counseling and other services to survivors of any kind of trauma in Central Florida. Today, we will be talking about services available to the LGBTQ plus community right here in Orange County. And with us today to speak about the services we offer at the VSC is VSC LGBTQ plus victim advocate and crisis counselor, Jessica George. Welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Emily.
I'm really excited to talk about all the amazing services that we have for this community, but to just start off, can you tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do at the VSC?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Jessica George. I'm a victim advocate here at Victim Service Center located in Central Florida. I'm actually an Orlando native, and it's such an honor to be here servicing those individuals that are dealing with sexual assault and trauma.
That's amazing. I know that you do an incredible work. I didn't know that you were a native of Floridian, so that's incredible that you're able to give back to the community that way. Can you tell us a little bit about the clients that we service here at VSC?
Sure. So we service individuals that deal with all kinds of trauma, particularly sexual assault and crime survivors. We service individuals that are 12 years and older and also secondary victimization.
So you talked a little bit about secondary victimization. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. So many individuals don't realize that they may have experienced secondary victimization. And so we do service those individuals that may not only have been there when individuals have experienced a sexual violence or crime, but also have overheard that maybe, or having similar behaviors and symptoms that are associated with trauma. And so if you have experienced a secondary victimization, we do service and provide resources, including advocacy for those individuals.
Got it. So it sounds like there's the primary survivor who may have gone through the victimization firsthand, but then we have these secondary survivor who might be their loved ones or their supporters who are helping that survivor, and they may also be able to get services from the VSC as well.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. So can you go do a brief overview of what those services actually are at the VSC?
Okay, so the services that we provide are free service when it comes to advocacy. So beyond just advocating in the community, we also do advocating in the criminal justice system. We have therapists readily available for mental health services too as well. We have support groups and we have workshops.
That's incredible. And I know that we do have a 24-hour helpline that survivors can call at any time. And then we have advocates such as yourself. And then we also have a therapy department and the support groups as well. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to also add, you did talk about our 24-hour helpline that we have. So this is a 24-hour, 7 days a week that's extremely confidential. We have active certified advocates that are there to walk you through that emotional support that you might need, or you're not comfortable with reaching out to our office line, that you can come to our 24-hour hotline. We have forensic exams that are also free and readily available, including our crisis response. So we are a certified sexual assault crisis center. And so when you actively have a sexual assault, we're one of the first responders there to support you through that process, because that can be very traumatic.
Absolutely, and I know that we did a whole episode actually on this program talking with our sexual assault nurse examiners to talk a little bit about what that process can look like. But I'd like to ask you specifically, what are services that we have specific to the LGBTQ plus community here?
Sure. So some of the services that we have is that mental health therapist, that particularly for LGBTQ plus A. Like myself, a victim advocate, we have LGBTQ plus advocates that are rarely available that create safe spaces, and we have support groups. Our Rainbow Resilience support group is readily available for those individuals in the community that have also experienced a sexual assault, that it can come to a safe space here.
Absolutely. So it sounds like we have specific LGBTQ plus advocates, we have specific therapists that work with this community. And can you tell me a little bit more about Rainbow Resilience, which is the support group that we offer?
Sure. So once a month on the second Tuesday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m., we have our Rainbow Resilience support group. Those are particularly for individuals that are adults that have experienced a sexual violence or a secondary victim that has experienced a sexual violence. They can come through our virtual support group that we have.
So who's eligible for that? So they have to be part of the LGBTQ plus community?
Correct.
Then?
They do have to be a part of the LGBTQ plus community, and they also have to be an adult of sexual violence.
Okay, got it. And what is that exactly like? What is it like to go to that kind of support group?
Sure, I know sometimes it can be extremely nerve-wracking to show up. I would say just be your authentic self and understand that this is a safe space. What you can do is call our 24-hour helpline, or you can call our office and say that you're interested in Rainbow Resilience Support Group. We would have a crisis counselor speak to you and go through an assessment, but I would say if you meet the requirements, this is not just about us saying that we have certain standards, it's really about you finding a safe space. And so if you do call our services, we'll be able to support you.
Absolutely. And I know that we did a whole episode on support groups too. And I think that there's kind of this misconception or myth that if you go to the support group, you have to tell your whole story and things like that. So what would you say to a survivor who might be nervous to be joining Rainbow Resilience?
I would say just come and show up as your authentic self. We're not here to re-traumatize or have you explain in details what that experience is, because it's extremely traumatic and it can be re-traumatizing. It's a space for us to really just to get support from the community, support from one another that have similar shared life experiences too as well. Maybe you're having difficulties with coping and certain behaviors or symptoms are coming up, and sometimes it's difficult to make sense of it. So showing up in the support group with individuals with some shared life experiences, you'll be able to get that support that you need.
Absolutely. And speaking of making those safe spaces, we talked briefly about forensic exams. How do our SANE nurses or sexual assault nurse examiners ensure that they are making those safe spaces for survivors of this community?
Sure. So sometimes there can be layered trauma and layered violence that is going on when it comes to the LGBTQ community that have experienced a sexual assault. And there's not always safe spaces in the community when it comes to access to care. Particularly at Victim Service Center, when it comes to our SANEs, we have modified services that we have readily available. We have affirming spaces, affirming identities that I think is very crucial to the services that they're going to be receiving.
And yeah, earlier, you mentioned again how crucial it is that VSC is making those safe spaces and providing those services for this community. Why is it so crucial that we have these services for the LGBTQ plus community?
I would say because not every area is safe, not every area is affirming, and there's a lot of barriers when it comes to access to care. There's a lot of barriers, a lot of misconceptions when it comes to the LGBTQ community. So we try to provide a safe space for them to be seen, heard, valued, and come with their authentic self so they're able to really receive that trauma and that healing process that they need. And not trauma, but I mean trauma care.
And why is it so important that that is part of their healing process, that they do have that safe space?
I think a part of it is not everywhere is safe, so they'll have their protective factors. And when you don't come with your authentic self, that authentic self is associated with being vulnerable. And our pain is coupled with that vulnerability. And if they're not able to be vulnerable and they don't feel safe, it's going to be very difficult to go through that trauma work and get that healing that they need to move forward.
Absolutely. And Jessica, just with the few minutes that we have left with each other, I wanted to ask you, why do you do what you do here at the VSC? What is so rewarding for you about this work?
Wow, that's a very tough question because I think many of the aspects of my role here is extremely rewarding, but I would say going back to that authenticity is providing a space for those individuals to be seen, heard, and show up in their authentic self as we move forward to creating a healing process for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you do a lot of amazing work where we go to some certain events, right? Like at Orlando Pride. What are some other events that we do here in Central Florida?
Sure. So we do partner with Zebra, and we also partner with One Orlando Alliance. And so those, we don't realize that sometimes in the communities we have certain agencies that may be servicing individuals that also can provide the similar resources for us. So we try to go to events that they're hosting, and so we're able to give that education and understand that, hey, this is a service that's free and really available for you. So we do participate in Pride, but also recently we had our Pulse anniversary, so Act, Give, Love. And so we participate in other community events that we have where we're able to share our services.
Absolutely, yeah. We just want to let everyone know that we're here and that these services are available to you. So thank you so much, Jessica. I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing about the amazing services we have here at the VSC.
Thank you.
And when we come back, we will be joined by One Orlando Alliance's Executive Director, Josh Bell, to speak more on other organizations in Orange County that provide services to this community. So don't go away. Welcome to the VSC Healing Begins Here podcast series. In this next segment, we are joined by the Executive Director of One Orlando Alliance, Josh Bell, to chat about some of the amazing services available for the LGBTQ plus community right here in Orange County. Josh, welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Emily, for the invitation. It's great to be here.
I'm really excited to talk to you about all the awesome services that we have here in Central Florida. But just to start off, can you tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do?
I'd be happy to. So I'm the Executive Director of One Orlando Alliance. I've been in this role since October of 2020. And the Alliance came about in the aftermath of Pulse. So when everyone was diving in to be there for people and to deal with all the just horrible trauma in the aftermath of Pulse, there were a lot of organizations that were in that space and were working, but needed more communication and coordination. And so there was a group of organizations that was brought together just in practically the hours after the tragedy. And really that group became the seed of the Alliance. And initially the focus was definitely on crisis care, crisis response. And then we got to a place where people valued the conversations, people valued the connections, people valued the way that we were working with each other rather than just near each other or even competing with each other. And so the decision was made in 2018 for the Alliance to be a freestanding 501c3. And so we're a coalition of 40 LGBTQ serving organizations. Our mission is to unite the LGBTQ serving organizations in Central Florida around 4 areas. We do advocacy, we do organizational development, community transformation, and resource sharing. And so our work is to combine the efforts that we're all doing so that we make our whole region better.
That's amazing. And I know that you brought up Pulse, and I want to talk a little bit about how when a community goes through a trauma and a tragedy together, why is it so important that we come together as a community following that?
So I think there's a lot of layers to a community and to a community's response to something horrific, right? So most visibly, we come together to meet the acute needs that are presented, and there are so many, right? I would say that the reality is the LGBTQ plus community is really communities. We are lots of different intersections of identity. And I think that some folks, like I'm a white, gay, cisgender man, a lot of gay culture tends to target me and people who are like me. But we also have a thriving LGBTQ Latinx community. We have an amazing collection of transgender leaders and transgender groups who are here. We have Black LGBTQ folks. And so I don't believe that we're united, really, because we're lots of different groups. But we're finding ways to say, how do we come together in ways that are equitable and just to make sure that everybody gets what they need and nobody's overserved while other people are underserved.
Yeah, it sounds like making sure that everyone is at the table and is able to get those services that we were talking about. And I had no idea that One Orlando Alliance had 40 different organizations. So what are some of those organizations and partner agencies you want to bring up today?
One of the things I love about my job is that I get to work with so many different organizations. So Victim Services Center is one of our organizations, and we're so glad that y'all are at the table. We also have the ones that more people might recognize as specifically LGBTQ+, like the Center, like Zebra Coalition. We also have the Orlando Gay Chorus. We have the Central Florida Sounds of Freedom Marching Band. We have the Pride Chamber. We have such a broad spectrum of organizations. We have Bros in Convo, we have Q Latinx. And so what's beautiful is that so many organizations are serving so many different populations, and we can find ways to leverage resources and relationships to make that work more cohesive and effective.
Absolutely. And I know that you brought up kind of the 4 different services that you provide as like advocacy and things like that. What about those different services that those particular community partners that you were mentioning that are part of One Orlando Alliance that you want to highlight?
Well, I think it depends on what people need, So we've got, the center is kind of a hub organization, and they offer lots of different kinds of services depending on what a person might need. Also, there was an organization that was founded in the aftermath of Pulse called the Orlando United Assistance Center, which was specifically created to care for Pulse-affected folks. That's now a program of the center. It's called the Orlando United Resiliency Center. And so for Pulse-affected folks, that now lives at the center. For other folks, there are services at the center, including support groups, depending on age, depending on identity. And so the center is a great place to start if someone's looking for services, because if the center doesn't provide it, then they can refer, and they can let you know, hey, this is available at other places. We also have the Mental Health Association of Central Florida is one of our members. And so if someone's looking for mental health resources, we usually direct them there. If someone's working with youth and they need resources in the LGBTQ plus community, Zebra Coalition is a lead agency there. And so it depends on who the person is and what they're looking for and what they need. But I'm confident that if you call one of the organizations that I just rattled off and you say, this is who I am and this is what I need, if that organization doesn't do it, they can probably say, we don't do that, but these people do. And here's the number.
Absolutely. I can totally see just knowing that they're there for you is pretty incredible. So obviously if someone just is looking for certain services, they can contact them and they can point them at least in the right direction.
Definitely.
And so I also wanted to talk a little bit about why these services are so important. Can you tell me a little bit about the LGBTQ plus survey?
Sure. So one of the things that the Alliance has done since we were founded was produce a document called the Alliance Agenda, which names 10 issues that are facing the LGBTQ plus community in Central Florida. We started that in 2018. We did 2018, 2019, and 2020. When I came into this position, I said, let's expand that with recent local data. Data on the LGBTQ plus community is not comprehensive. We have pockets of it, right? So we have a lot of data around HIV and STIs and healthcare, but we don't have a lot of data around average education level or your housing stability. So the Central Florida LGBTQ plus survey, we're getting ready to roll that out in July. And our goal is to get a snapshot of the whole spectrum of our communities. So that'll tell us things like age and people's racial and ethnic identity, how people identify in terms of their gender, how people identify in terms of their sexual orientation. But it'll also give household income, how many people live with you, what's your housing level? Are you anywhere from experiencing homelessness to being a landlord? We want to know the whole thing. Looking at healthcare access, mental health care access, and then also a very important one, asking the question of where are you out? Like in what spaces do you share your full self?
Sure.
And if there are spaces where you don't, what are the barriers? And so when we have that data, we can look at our whole region, the 7 counties that we serve, and say, okay, the folks in this zip code are experiencing these issues at these intersections of identity. This is the problem. Let's get our collective brain trust together and figure out what are the strategies that we're going to use to address that problem. And then we're going to take the survey again in probably 2 years and see where we've moved the needle and where our strategies have been effective or where we need to adjust.
Thank you so much, Josh, for coming here today and talking about the amazing resources that we have here in Central Florida for the LGBTQ plus community.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Getting to share about what we do is always a joy, and we want as many people as possible to know about what's available.
Thank you so much, Josh. And in our next and final segment, we will be joined by Gustavo Rico from the Zebra Coalition, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the VSC Begins Here podcast series. In this final segment, we are joined by the development manager of Zebra Coalition, Gustavo Rico, to chat about the amazing work Zebra does for LGBTQ plus youth. Gustavo, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about Zebra and all the amazing stuff that they do, but first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, so my name is Gustavo. I'm the development manager, which really means connecting people to the kids, right? So we have the youth that we're doing fantastic work with, and we're really changing their lives in very, very meaningful ways. But there's a very tricky situation of having to protect their privacy and also share the amazing stories coming out of it, right? So that's kind of my job with trying to figure out that line in between the two. And making sure people know that all their money is going to great stuff here in Orlando.
Absolutely. And can you tell me a little bit about Zebra Coalition and also its name, where it got its name?
Yeah, so Zebra Coalition is a place where we like to empower LGBTQ youth to thrive in the city, right? We want to make sure that we are creating a strong community of people that know what love is, that know that their own worth, right? And the only way that we can do that is creating safe spaces for them. So part of that reason is why we have the name Zebra Coalition. When you look at it in paper, you're not gonna say, oh, this is just for like queer kids. It's just, you really don't know what it is about. And part of that is because it has not always been a safe space for people to say, oh, I'm gonna go to a specific queer space, right? So it's a way for them to be able to talk to their parents if the parents are not super supportive, or just being able to put on their resume if they're part of our council, so they are not outing themselves all the time.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about the services that Zebra provides.
Yeah, so we try to teach the kids how to thrive as a queer person, right? So that looks different for each person. But for us, we have 4 main programs that we do that with, right? We have the housing program, which if you get kicked out of your house for being queer, or maybe you're running away because you know your parents are gonna be very abusive to you, right? You can come to us and you can stay with us, and we're going to provide everything that you need to survive, right? We're going to provide rent, utilities, toilet paper, anything that you need to be able to take care of yourself and be able to do that, right? Because we want you to start thinking about what is that you want to do with your life. Who are you? What are the things that you're going to try to do? But you can't do that unless you have housing, right?
Absolutely.
So our first program is housing. The second one is therapy. So we provide free therapy to any kid 13 to 24. That's unlimited therapy. So if you want to come to us every single week for 2 years, that's completely fine. If you want to just come for a quick checkup for just 3 sessions, that is fine with us. We never charge anybody because we think that everybody should have access to mental health, right? The other one we have is support groups. And support groups is really for a way for youth to come and find friends, right? Like when you're a queer youth and you think about how do I find other queer youth, right? It's really hard because there's not many spaces. So we create a space for 13 to 24-year-olds to come in, to have safe space that is sober, that is safe for them to be there and make friends. And the last thing is we have to support the parents, right? Nobody knows how to be a parent. Nobody gives you a guideline. So if you're a parent that has a queer kid and you want to be supportive but you don't know how, you can come to us to learn how to be the best champion for your kid.
That's incredible. I can see how you really cover a lot of different things, where you kind of cover that crisis support, but also you're able to create these safe spaces for queer youth as well. So I'd like to ask you, do you have drop-in hours? What is it like to actually come to Zebra Coalition for those services, for that safe space?
Yeah, so we have a couple of services. So we have what's called drop-in, which is really just a space for anybody in the community, 13 to 24, to come in and get all their needs met. So if you need to have friends, if you need food, if you need a shower, if you want to just come hang out and take a break from the hot summer month, right? You can come in from 3 to 5 p.m. every day, Monday to Friday. And it's just a fun way to meet other people. And then from 5 to 6 p.m., we also have different activities for people to do. So we have movie nights, and we have arts and crafts, and we have different activities for them to do.
That's amazing. So I know that Zebra Coalition specifically works with LGBTQ plus youth. Why is it important that LGBTQ plus youth have this space and are supported?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about a queer space when it comes for people is there's not many of them out there, right? And there's so much trauma, and a lot of people are fixated on how hard it is to be a queer person in this world, right? Well, part of it, for us to get the kids to survive, right? To make sure that they don't commit suicide with everything going on, is to make sure that we have hope and joy. Those are the 2 main things that you have for people to say, okay, I'm gonna keep at this. I'm gonna still do my homework, even though my state governor is like going after me, right? Because I know there's a future for me. And the only way that you do that is through joy and community, right? That's the only way to do it. So we have to make sure that we create the spaces for any ages that need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Making that space for youth to really thrive by having these safe spaces, especially since we know that they're more at risk for different things, right? They're more vulnerable to different violence, and that's why we really partner a lot as well. So we've been talking a lot about, community partnerships today. So how do VSC and Zebra really come together and help support the LGBTQ plus community here?
Yeah, so one of the things that we look at when we support queer people is really the intersection of identities, right? So like you said, it's such a marginalized group that there's a lot of violence that's gonna come to this group. One of the things that we talk a lot about is sexual assault, right? Yeah. But when it comes to like queer partnerships or queer people, there's not a lot of language of like what happens when it's a woman-to-woman sexual violence or it's a man-to-man, right? Do you have language for that? Do you have someone that understands you instead of saying that doesn't count because they just don't see it that way, right? So we partner up with VSC to make sure that queer people that have had to go through this very violent instances have someone that is going to be on their side to be able to talk about it and not have to kind of convince the person that the violence is real, which is a whole violent behavior for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really, community partnerships, honestly, to me, is like the way we're going to prevent violence, in my opinion. But with that, I know that Zebra also does amazing events in the community. So do you have any events that you want to share?
Yeah, so we have, everybody tells us how can I get involved? Can I volunteer? Can I see the kids? Volunteering directly with the kids is really hard. It's like a 6-month process. We have a wait list. You have to go through so much training because we don't just let anybody be around our kids, right? But another way to be able to make sure that you're supporting the kids is go to one of our fundraisers.
And I know also, as a final thought, is there anything specifically that you'd like to share right now to anyone in the community who might be listening?
Yeah, I think from all the years that we've done this work, I think we've done a really good job in a community to understand sexuality when it comes to understanding that people are gay or bi or anything like that. I think a lot of people are having trouble with kids that are trans, especially when they're younger. And right now there's this whole conversation about that trans kids are having too easy of a time accessing healthcare. And there's this fear mongering of we're just giving hormones to all the kids that we can. The reality is that healthcare is incredibly hard to access for our kids. Even kids and parents that want them to start hormones or want them to start transitioning, it's too expensive for them to do it, or they haven't been able to find a healthcare professional that will do it. So the real problem is there's not enough healthcare access for trans kids instead of the other side that they're saying that there's too much.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really appreciate everything that you've shared today, Gustavo, and all the incredible work that you do and the incredible work that Zebra does as well for the LGBTQ plus community here in Central Florida.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And if you would like to learn more about the VSC and our free services, please visit victimservicecenter.org, call our office line at 407-254-9415, or call our crisis line at 407-500-HEAL. And to everyone listening, healing is not linear, and you are not alone.